Imagine being hoisted by ropes, stripped, and lowered slowly onto a wooden spike shaped like a Christmas tree. No splashy gore, no quick mercy, just gravity, your own weight, and a point that keeps reminding you it's there. Nightmare? Yep, except someone somewhere might have actually built the thing. Today we're chasing the paper trail, the gossip, and the rusty nails behind the Judas Cradle. Who dreamed it up? Who got straddled on it? And why do a bunch of historians now insist it's more urban legend than iron-clad fact? Stick around, the answers get uglier than the questions. 16th century Europe ran on fear the way your car runs on gas. Plague memories were fresh. The printing press was turning every idea into cheap gossip, and the church was locked in a PR death match with reformers. Into that mess stomped the Spanish Inquisition, determined to purify belief through public spectacle. Civil courts and church courts competed for who could stage the most memorable punishment. Torture wasn't hidden. It was practically Broadway. Confession had to be freely given, but pain was a perfectly legal shortcut. Judges wanted names, remorse, and a crowd gasping in the square. Cue the greatest hits: the rack, the strappado, the Iron Maiden, and today's headliner, the Judas Cradle. If you could turn human agony into a morality play, you had a job for life. Zip over to 1490s baloney. Ippolito de Marsiliis isn't a hooded executioner. He's a bookish law prof who doodles in the margins of his treatises. His big idea? Torture should leave no permanent damage so the accused can still stand trial. Practical, right? In one margin he sketches a seat like a cradle, sharp enough to scare, but he claims unlikely to kill if used judiciously. Did he ever build it? Jury's still out. The catchy nickname Judas Cradle never shows up in his surviving Latin. It appears centuries later, probably a moral gag linking victims to betrayal. Still, the label stuck, and the pyramid chair became the professor's unwanted legacy. Try explaining that line on your CV. Picture a waist-high tripod. On top sits a wooden or iron pyramid about the size of a traffic cone, angled just enough to split the difference between terror and tissue. Victims were hauled up by ropes tied to wrists and ankles, spine dangling. Torturers led the rope out inch by inch until the point met the most private anatomy. Add ankle weights if you needed extra convincing. Rock the tripod, spin the victim, smear the point with oil, whatever kept the confession flowing. Infections often did the killing later. First aid was a bucket of seawater if you were VIP. Death might take hours, days, or never come, leaving survivors broken and shamed. Efficiency lay in humiliation, not body count. The Spanish Inquisition loved a teachable moment. A 1500 for Seville log mentions a seat of penance that fits the cradle's description, though the ink is annoyingly vague. Inquisitors favored it for women accused of witchcraft or heresy. Public nudity doubled the scarlet letter factor. Crowds gathered to watch the condemned lowered onto the point of conversion. Confess fast, and you might trade the pyramid for a lifetime of wearing the penitential San Benito cloak. Hold out and the pyramid bit deeper. One memo brags a Lutheran bookseller recanted in 30 minutes proof. The scribe winks. The gadget opens both body and soul. Modern scholars think the numbers smell of office politics, but even one confirmed use is enough to make us squirm 5 centuries later. Here's where footprints vanish. No authenticated cradle predates 1983. The ones you see in museums are plywood replicas inspired by Victorian penny dreadfuls. In the 1970s, torture tourism entrepreneurs realized a pyramid seat photographs great and fits neatly on a postcard rack. Suddenly the cradle resurfaced in a dozen castles at once, always recently discovered, never with paperwork. Historians now cite it as a textbook case of memory laundering. Build a spooky prop, tell a spookier story, collect admission. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Maybe the real one rotted in some cellar. Still, the myth trail is thick, and that friction keeps the clicks coming. Ever flinch at a needle? Multiply that by helplessness and an audience. The cradle weaponized humanity's oldest phobia, puncture. Victims hallucinated long before flesh tore proof that dread is its own agony. Inquisitors understood crowd psychology. Every gasp from the onlookers reinforced church authority. Modern interrogation manuals still flag the cradle when warning about pain that produces compliance, but garbage data. The pyramid may be gone, the psychology isn't. You've met the cradle even if you didn't know its name. It cameos in grimdark fantasy novels, heavy metal album art, and at least one family-friendly escape room that probably should have read the fine print. Horror films love the visuals: single lantern, creaking rope, slow descent. Video games turn it into a timed puzzle: hit X to survive. Each retelling sends off nuance until only the shock remains. Reproduce the cradle enough and nobody remembers if it ever really existed. Quick favor: if you're still here, hit like so the algorithm knows we're doing history, not gore porn. Sub if you want more episodes separating medieval myth from fact. Next up, the breast ripper, another gadget that gets misquoted more than Shakespeare. Academic Twitter, yes. It's a thing erupts every time someone calls the cradle fake. Campe says no artifact, no proof. File it beside Iron Maidens and drip chastity belts as moralizing props. Campe points to the stack of oblique legal references and asks, since when do torturers leave blueprints? Camp-C shrugs, maybe something like it existed but looked more like a sharpened horse block. Until someone digs up a dated pyramid with receipts, the fight is all footnotes and fever. But here's the kicker. Even as rumor, the cradle cowed prisoners. That power dynamic is historically real. Time for a grisly game of Would You Rather. Option A. The rack your joints pop like bubble wrap. Option B. Strapado shoulders dislocate while you dangle. Option C. The cradle. Victims in translated transcripts rank the pyramid most feared, not because it hurts more but because it invades the last inch of privacy. The rack might cripple you, yet society handed out beggars' crutches. The cradle left you alive, unable to sit, and branded in the groin. In the brutal economics of suffering, humiliation multiplies pain. Gender history sharpens the picture. Scribes obsessively logged the cradle's use on women, especially midwives and widows whose independence rattled city fathers. The penetrative feature fused sexual shame with judicial terror. A 1,520 memo notes a victim cried first against God, then against her own womb. Men faced it too, mostly sodomy suspects, but their records rarely rate purple prose. Feminist scholars argue the cradle shows early state control of female bodies dressed up as theology. The pyramid was patriarchy with a point. By the late 1700s, Enlightenment satirists roasted judicial torture as barbaric. Spain abolished inquisitorial torture in 1834, though local jails dragged their boots. The cradle probably retired earlier. References dry up after 1640, replaced by quicker options like the water cure and garrote. Why the fade out? Budgets. Prolonged torture bled man-hours. Public taste shifted. Crowds wanted snappy executions, not all-day matinees. New ideas of evidence: fingerprints, documents meant you didn't need a confession to convict. The pyramid seat, too slow for a coffee break audience, rotted in storerooms and slipped into legend. Among scraps, one letter pops. A Florentine merchant jailed in Seville, 1562, writes of the seed that splits like the betrayer's soul. Historians bicker over authenticity. The Italian feels a bit modern, but details line up. Ropes, pulleys, pork fat to mock Jewish inmates. Real or Renaissance creepypasta. Pamphleteers reprinted it across Protestant Europe as anti-Catholic clickbait. Fear sold then. Fear sells now. Short answer: no. Even setting aside ethics, studies show info yanked under extreme pain is garbage. The U.S. Army Field Manual bans anything cradle adjacent. The unclassifies it as torture. Yet authoritarian regimes still flirt with symbolic impalement. Photos from 1980s Chile show makeshift pyramid stools used briefly on dissidents. Each era thinks it invented cruelty until history coughs up an old sketch. The pyramid keeps returning because pain is cheap and geometry never needs batteries. So what sticks? The Judas Cradle may never earn a spot in a glass case with a tidy date tag, yet its fingerprints are all over legal theory, gender politics, and pop culture's lust for the lurid. Whether a Bologna professor sketched it on parchment or a 1972 curator built it from imagination, the device weaponized gravity, shame, and the most private anatomy. It reminds us cruelty doesn't need to exist to be effective, it only needs to be believed. And if history teaches anything, stories we tell about pain shape power long after the pain is gone. Drop a comment. Do you think the cradle was real or just medieval fake news? Which myth should we poke holes in next? Like, subscribe, share because the algorithm, unlike the Inquisition, just wants your click, not your confession.